Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us on the second webinar of our series, Being Black in STEM, Insights on Higher Education. Today, we're joined by Adrian, Zara, and Darius, who are all undergraduates in the Department of Chemical Engineering at Imperial College London. They're going to be sharing their insight into writing applications and personal statements when applying to university. There'll be time for questions at the end of the session, so if there's something you'd like to ask, just pop it in the chat box and we'll answer it at the end. And with that, I'll hand over to Adrian, Zara, and Darius.
Okay, so hi guys, my name is Zara, as I said. I'm in my third year at the department as an undergrad. And something that's interesting about me is that I love baking. I made some bread the other day. I made cookies for my flatmates and brownies and blondies and anything I feel like it. I think it's so much fun. It's such a great way to spend my time. And I would describe myself as entangled with thermal, because what really got me into chemical engineering is understanding how microscopic phenomena, so how like particles interact with each other, affect the macroscopic properties that we see with our eyes. So like things like color and mixing and boiling points and melting points, and how we can use that to end up with the processes and the reactions that we want, was something that really got me interested in coming into this degree.
Hi, I'm Adrian. Like Zara, I'm also a third year student. And one of the things I love to do in my spare time is read, whether it's books or just keeping up with current affairs. I love learning new words and just finding out more about the world we're in. One of my favorite modules in chemical engineering is reaction engineering. I like how people are able to take the specifications of a reaction and use that to try and design the optimum reactor. I like how it uses maths and chemistry, which are my favorite subjects in A-levels, and how you can apply that knowledge to build something that could contribute to a process and impact people in the real world. And I also like degree, like that's another thing about the degree as a whole. It's quite diverse. It draws from so many different subject areas, math, sciences, and even economics, and you learn so many different things. It's great.
Hi guys, my name's Darius. I'm a second year chemical engineering student. And one fun fact about me is I love to cook. Like, it's a genuine hobby for me. Like, I will literally just like have my friends give me a bunch of ingredients and be like, oh, what can I do with this? Just like out of fun, just like for fun. So I really love to cook. And in relation to like my degree, what got me into chemical engineering, and like as I'm here, my love for it has only grown, is reaction engineering, similar to Adrian. Just like because one of like the main parts of chemical engineering is that like process scale up. So reaction engineering, you're combining maths, chemistry, you're trying to figure out the kinetics of the reaction, how to the best way to work with all those things, actually make mass produce this to actually like do these processes on a large scale efficiently to get the like conversion you want and all that. And yeah, I love that.
So we're gonna start by going into what the application process is basically about. So you have your UCAS application that you use for all the universities you're going to give to, and you start with submitting your education so far. So the grades you've gotten at your GCSEs, any other qualifications you've gotten as well. So if you've done DOV, if you've done music or any English speaking things, you add that to that as well. So those are things that have already happened, things that you're just giving them more background information about you. From there, you now include what exams you expect to do. So the modules you're doing, if it's still modular, or like what aspects of the exams you're doing or subjects that you're doing for when you finally finish your A-levels. And then you have these things happening concurrently, which is that your teachers will submit your references and your predicted grades. And this is kind of important because even though this is what your teachers are giving in, they can only give in what you show them. So I know a lot of people like to kind of like hang out and like just like chill for like quite a lot of the 2 years of your A-levels and like put in all the work at the last minute and come out with great grades, and that does work. However, your teachers can only give you references and predicted grades on what you are showing them and like what they think you're able to do with what work you're giving in. So even though it is only thing that matters is at the end of your A levels, so the work that you do at the end, your exams at the end, try and engage with your lessons, try and put in the work in the continuous assessments, just to ensure that they can give you the highest grades that they know that you are able to do. And this is the part that's quite important, which is your personal statement. That is the part that you are just showing your unfiltered self to your universities. So we're going to talk about that a bit more in detail in this webinar, because that is quite an important thing, because all the other things I said are things that are kind of out of your control. You already got the grades you've gotten from your GCSEs. Your teachers are the ones that are going to write your references and going to give you your predicted grades. Your personal statement is you showing you. So with all those things I just said, you can apply to up to 5 universities. With 5 universities, something to keep in mind is that you don't have to apply at the same time. So some places have earlier requirements to give in your application for you to be considered for certain things, and you can use that to your advantage. So if you're sure about maybe 2 places you definitely want to go to, but you're not sure about the rest, you can apply to those 2 places to start. And then when you do a bit more research, when you go from some open days and things like that, you can now apply for your extra 3 places. So you don't have to be rushed to apply to all 5 places at once. You can take your time looking for what places really suit you. Now, once you've done that, you can start hearing back with responses for how your application has gone, or you might hear that you might be getting interviews for the next stage of your application. Acceptances usually are conditional on specific grades, and something to keep in mind is that with certain STEM subjects and at Imperial, you might be asked for specific grades from specific subjects. So in chemical engineering, they'll usually ask for a specific grade in math and chemistry, while leaving you leeway to do other things like economics and further math or physics, which aren't as necessary for the degree, because they just have to make sure that you have the skills in specific subjects so that you don't struggle too much when you come for the degree.
So, personal statements. What are they and why are they needed? Well, as Zara briefly mentioned, personal statements are your opportunity to talk about yourself, tell universities about your skills and interests and why you should be picked for their course over the other applicants. And for universities that have interviews as part of the selection process, they may be used as talking points. So if you mentioned any books you read, they might pick up on that, talk to you a little bit about what you read. And this does vary for different unis and different courses. Like humanities subjects are more likely to talk about books because you would more often not talk about mostly books in those statements. Personal statements can be at most 4,000 characters and 47 lines long. On the UCAS system, it's recommended that you use a text editor to write your statements, but the way that what may be considered 4,000 characters on that text editor may not necessarily be that amount on the UCAS website. So double check where you've written your statement to make sure that it fits UCAS's requirements. And finally, you write only one statement, which means that all your choices will see the same one. So, yeah.
Now, you know a bit about what your personal statement is, like what it's used for, but now you need to kind of get what should be in your personal statement. So something to keep in mind is that you've already given in your grades from your old exams, you've given in your qualifications. So personal statements are a time to kind of show your passion for the subject that you're picking, explain why you're suited for the course, why they should take you really, and kind of show you as like a holistic human being, like, you know, more than just your grades and like the things you get at exams. You have all these interests and all these passions in your subject, and this is your time to like just express it as much as you can. So some things that you can put in your personal statement are your hobbies and your extracurriculars. However, I would say that to an extent when it comes to like STEM subjects, because places like Imperial, they are really focused on more academic stuff. Like Imperial has tons of societies and ways for you to like enjoy yourself and express yourself and find a community. But at the end of the day, they want to know that you can deal with the workload and the type of reading and like extra reading you might have to do around your course, and like the passion that you have for your course to be able to deal with such a high intensity environment. So that's where things like super curriculars come in. So how I'll explain super curriculars is like extracurricular is about the breadth that you do outside of your academics. I would say that super curriculars is about how in depth you go into your academics. So that would be stuff like doing reading around your subject and like things outside of your A levels, going to like seminars or webinars on things that interest you in your subject, as well as going to museums, maybe doing a course online, just to learn more about your degree and what it entails. It's really good doing super curricular because it not only gives you things to talk about, shows the universities that you have a real passion for your subject, that you can take the time out by yourself to do the work to learn more, but it also helps you kind of understand what exactly you're going to be getting yourself into when you pick your degree, like the difference between chemistry and chemical engineering, between different types of engineering, between electronic engineering, something that people might not have done at much level when you're in A levels. Doing some reading around that, make sure that you know that that is actually the choice that you want to do. Because once you can speak passionately about that, or you can find yourself reading into so many interesting things about those subjects, you know that this might be the place for you, because you're going to have to do that when you come to university, and already having that passion makes it a lot easier. Something else that is really important to add to your personal statement is your soft skills, your transferable skills. These are things that you won't really get a qualification on. Nobody's going to give you a qualification like, oh, yep, you got like a 9 in like leadership skills or a 9 in teamwork. But in your extracurriculars and your hobbies, you can show those leadership positions. So like maybe if you're a prefect, you can say you learned how to work in a team, or doing volunteering work, you learn how to communicate with people and talk with people. Those are things that universities really like to see, because it shows that you are a well-rounded person, that you can contribute in other ways when you come to the university, and you'll be able to deal with other aspects of the course, like doing the teamwork and group works and working on projects and managing your time properly. So be sure to include those type of things in your personal statement as well.
So now I'm going to talk about research. Now I'm going to talk about researching for your personal statement. So you know what to include, you know what a personal statement is, you've done all the other application stuff, now you're ready to actually start writing. So why is this research important? Well, the thing is, like, the research is not just like, oh, it could be anything as simple as, oh, how do I actually write a statement? Like, what is the structure? Even this is a form of research for a personal statement, because I'm giving you information on how to write a statement. And so it could be anything it could be from something as simple as how do I actually write a statement, to as complex as, let's say you want to go into chemical engineering, you're interested in nuclear energy, to like, oh, how does nuclear fusion work? What are the advancements that are being made in that industry? So I can put in my statements and show them that, oh yes, I'm very interested. As Zara said, super curriculars, extra reading. So that's why research is important. But how do you actually approach this research? Because like there's a lot of it out there. So how do you sort it out? How do you know, like, okay, this is what I want, this is what I don't want? For me, what I found helpful was, because I'm a chemical engineering student, and when applying, I was like, okay, let me try and like split the degree into different areas. So I did like the chemistry part, the engineering part, the nuclear energy part, which is something I'm very interested in. And then I was like, okay, something more, not necessarily niche, but something more advanced that is definitely above A level. And then I chose thermal. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to find 4 books in this area and I'm going to read on them to actually advance my knowledge in those areas. So it helps to just sort of like sort it out, like split it into different components and be like, okay, let me approach research in this area, this area, this area, and then you go from there. So you've sorted it out. How do you actually start? For one thing I found really helpful in A levels was this, like in your textbooks, you would notice there are like there are sections where they have like extra facts or like did you know this or notes on further reading. So you could literally start from there and then you'd go on to like journals, and that could lead to like journals and research papers, which I've listed next as examples of research sources you can use. So research papers, books, TED Talks, online courses, seminars, and another very useful one which people don't realize is the actual university's websites, because almost 90% of the time on their on like the degree page on the website, they would have information on they are looking for in a personal statement, how to apply, what are the best things to say in your statements, things like that. So now you're ready to start writing, but you need to know what do's and don'ts for your personal statements. And the first one I would say, which Zara touched on this a bit, don't just list your achievements, you have to expand on them. What do I mean by that? So let's say you were the head boy and the head of science club, and you did D of E and all that. So you can't just go in your personal statement, I was head boy, I did D of E, I was in the science club. Okay, what does that tell me as someone who's like someone in the admissions team? What does that tell me about you? All I know from that is that you went to a room and you sat down and you did, like, I don't get any information about you from that. So I need to know what skills you gained from that. You were head boy, so it helped you with your leadership skills. You were in science club, so it improved your team working. You were in D of E, so you became more adaptable to difficult situations. So everything you say, everything you've done, every task you've undertaken, every achievement or award you've earned has to be related to something, to your own personal development, and that has to be shown in your personal statements. And then, like Adrian said, you aren't just applying to one, like you'll have one personal statement for every course. And for most people, this wouldn't really be next point wouldn't really be an issue. But if there's some variation in the courses you're applying to, you don't want to make your statement overly specific to any one course, because then you're sort of neglecting the rest. And at admissions officer and I'm seeing a personal statement that I can very clearly tell is not designed for the degree I'm offering, or like, as far as I'm concerned, I was just another option you put in there because you have no actual passion for this degree, because your statement is literally not for this degree. So you have to remember to keep it, make sure it covers all the courses you're applying to. Again, this would, if you're applying to like 5 identical chemical engineering degrees or 5 um, aeronautical engineering degrees that are almost exactly the same, then this isn't really an issue. But let's say you're doing something like you're applying to 3 nuclear engineering degrees and 2 mechanical engineering degrees because you want to approach nuclear engineering from a mechanical engineering perspective, then you have to make sure you still cover those mechanical engineering elements in your statements, because nuclear engineering is obviously more niche than mechanical engineering. And another important point is, I'd say you have to make sure you avoid, like, obviously it's not completely inevitable, but as much as possible, try to avoid using cliches. Don't write in your statement from the age of I knew I wanted to be a chemical engineer. Like, no, you were 7 years old, you don't know what a chemical engineer was. So please just don't. We all know that's not the case. And also try, like, if you're using the word passionately over and over and over and over again, it just seems redundant. Like, it's a bit, it's pedantic. It's just like, why? Like, okay, you're passionate, how? Like, show me your, like, don't use the word passionately to show that you're passionate. That's probably like the most overused cliche, because it's overdone. And the easiest way to avoid using cliches is to try and make it as personal as possible at every point. So in my statement, I sort of had a from when I was young statements, but I didn't write it like that. What I wrote is my passion for chemical engineering developed when I would follow my father to his sites, and I would see how the calcium worked, and then this like made me want to do more research, and then I found out about the role chemical engineers play in this degree. So that started when I was young, but I didn't write from a young age, and I made it personal, and I also showed like, oh, he's actually started doing his research, because I started talking about like calcium silicate fibrils, which is something like you don't know at A level. So it shows like, oh, he's done more reading, and so it shows like, okay, he's done more reading and he's interested in our course. Another very important thing is you should try to write as many drafts as possible. I'd say like the ideal range is like 3 to 5, but if you need more, then go for more, because the thing is your first draft is very unlikely be your best work, because it's just like you're just sort of like, my first draft was honestly sort of just like word vomit. Like I had an entire section where I was going on and on and on about how glass was produced, which is unnecessary, because my lecturers, they all know that. Why am I telling them that? They don't need to know I know that. They don't need to know I know that in detail. And it was almost like 1,000 characters on the production of glass, which is dumb and unnecessary. So that was my first draft. And then I worked and worked and worked on it. And eventually I had statements, which I'm still actually very proud of, that I submitted in. So, and if I had submitted my first draft, I probably wouldn't have gotten in here, because it was an objectively bad personal statement. And that might not be the case for you. Your first draft might be amazing, but you could probably get it better on the next few drafts. And another thing I'd say, probably the most important thing, is do not lie or make unsupported claims in your personal statements, because it's a personal statement. It's supposed to be an honest reflection of yourself. Yes, you're supposed to sell yourself. So like make yourself sound as amazing as possible, but do that with the truth. You should be able to do that with the truth. And another reason why this is so important is if you find somewhere like Imperial for Chemical Engineering, for example, you have to come in for an interview. And if you come in for an interview and you're like, oh, I read this book, and you lied about reading this book in your personal statements, and your interviewer goes, oh, that person is actually a very close friend of mine. Oh, what did you think about this, and this? And then some of you are just sat there looking at each other because you're a liar and you've been caught. And like, what are you going to do from there? So definitely be honest. Sell yourself. Make yourself sound as good as possible, but you should be able to do that with the truths. And I would definitely advise you to start writing it early, even if you haven't started right now. 28th of October is still early enough to get a wonderful statement in by January. You could probably get a wonderful statement in by the 28th of November. So you just definitely don't want to leave it to like the last week of December or the first week of January and you're rushing to write your statement, because I can almost guarantee that it would just not be the best you could have done, because you're rushing, you're stressed, you're like pushing it to the last minute. If you, worst case scenario, if you haven't even started your research, you're now also trying to research and write your statement in the space of 2 weeks, you're trying to produce several drafts. It's just going to be messy, and you just definitely don't want to go that route. And another very, very important point is you do not want to plagiarize, because it's kind of linked to the lying point. If you're plagiarizing, then you're probably lying. And also, UCAS has a similarity checker, and they don't tell you the similarity percentage till after you've submitted it in and it's been sent up to your universities, and universities see that similarity percentage. So if you have a high similarity percentage, they know you've lied. And you like the university knows you've lied, or they know you've copied someone else's statements, and you're basically automatically disregarded at that point. Because if you're plagiarizing for something as simple, not necessarily simple, but like the first point of contact, their first impression of you, if you're lying on their first impression of you and you're plagiarizing on their first impression of you, then they're not going to want you. Like, if you're plagiarizing for this, like what's going to happen when you have to write like actual essays and research papers? So that's an automatic like no. And finally, I'd say you definitely want to get advice from your parents and teachers, and like all that. Like if you have peers that have already gone through this process, you definitely want to get advice from them, because most times they have a lot of knowledge and they're very willing to help you. And even if it's just like, okay, could you read the drafts I've written? Tell me how I can improve. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? Because a lot of the time it's very hard to be your own critic, which you have to do when you're writing a personal statement. But getting an outside opinion can change your perspective on things and make you think, oh yeah, maybe that doesn't work best. Maybe going about it like this and this and this would make it slightly better. But I will say on this point that even if, as much as you want to get like as much advice and get as many opinions as possible, there has to be a certain limit to the amount of outside opinions you're getting, because like they say, too many cooks spoil the broth. So if you have too many hands and too many eyes on your personal statement, you could model your own voice, and then your personality, your own voice, you just don't come true enough in the statements, and you definitely want to avoid that.
So following on from what Darius mentioned about statements, these are some extra bits and bobs about formatting, structure, supports, things like that. So first thing, you want to list out, before you start writing a statement, you want to list out all your achievements and experiences and everything that achievements, experiences, and books and research you've done, and list everything that they've taught you. Because if you do this, then you have a good idea of you have a good idea of your skills, and you'll know which achievements to put in your statement that will showcase the highest number of the most amount of your skills, and also enhance and also demonstrate your interest in your course, like to as many demonstrate your interest and also how well-rounded you are as a person. Going to teachers for this can also help with this. You'll normally have a referee who will be assigned to you by the school, and more often than not, they'll be the one. They'll normally be a teacher in a course that's related to, in a subject related to the course you want to study at uni. So they'll have a good idea of the kind of things that the people reading your statement might want to see, they might be interested in. And they'll be able to advise you on structure, on your sentences, whether or not this could be said in fewer words, or if you don't have enough in it, that kind of thing. And if you're struggling to stay within the character limit, it's definitely a good idea to try and reduce your sentences, use fewer words, if possible, use smaller words, more punctuation. And line breaks if you're struggling with the line limit. So line breaks basically just they separate your paragraphs without the space in between, which could register as a line on UCAS. Another thing is to accept that your puzzle statement will probably be a bit corny / embarrassing for you later. And it's not through any fault of your own, but I think it's important to not include cliches. There's only so many different ways that you can express your passion for your subject. So obviously trying to use the obvious cliches as the ones that Darius mentioned. Like when I was this age, I knew I wanted to be so and so. But showing your passion always seems a bit cheesy. It's not something that you'd ordinarily do to that degree for anything. So don't worry about it too much. As long as your referees and people you ask to read it are happy with it, then it'll likely be all right. And when starting to write your statement, it's always best to go from the middle, because the middle paragraph is where you'll have all the achievements, experiences, all the skills, all the things that the reader will be most interested in finding out about you. And if you have all your achievements listed out, then it'll be easy for you to decide which ones you want to put into that paragraph and how you want to order it, how much you want to put in. But if you do this, then the opening and ending paragraphs, because with the opening paragraph, it's harder to write because it might not have any important information in it, but you want to make it interesting, you want to make it stand out to the reader so they'll remember you when they read it. And this might be hard to do like straight away, especially if you're a perfectionist. you may be worried about trying to get that perfect opening line. So if you deal with the middle first, then you can spend the rest of your time on the other two paragraphs without losing too much time. And so Zara mentioned hobbies and extracurriculars that you can include in your statement. But hobbies and extracurriculars, they're only really good to include if you can link them to some kind of personal growth or skill that you gain from it. And obviously, these are the things that most universities want to hear more about. They don't really focus too much on the extracurricular stuff, unless it, as I said, helps demonstrate some kind of growth in some respect. So I think the best distribution of information in your statement would be 80% academic stuff, so the books, experiences, and achievements. 80% of that in your statement, and 20% could be the unrelated stuff, so all things like you do in your free time, the other extracurriculars. And finally, as I said before, link your achievements and experiences to your own personal development. So if there's no skill that you can link it to, then it's probably not best to include in your statement, because chances are it'll already be in your application somewhere. So to have it in your application and also have it in your personal statement without anything to show about you from it, there's no point in including it. Oops, sorry. So the good, the bad, and the ugly, left to right from my statement. I liked my left paragraph because it demonstrated a lot of reading. I managed to integrate a book I read and what it taught me, which I quite liked. And that's the kind of thing that unis will be looking for in your statement. My ugly, I mentioned I'm looking forward to something that the interview would likely already know about, without any source of information as how I knew it. It's just kind of pointless to write that, because it doesn't really show anything about me. It doesn't show how I found that information out. It doesn't show any of my skills or anything like that. And the ugly, it's just the corny stuff I'm talking about. It's not inherently bad. It's just slightly cliched. Could have been done without.
Right, so here are some extracts from my personal statements. So my first paragraph is linking what I learned at IA level, so math, to something that I'm interested in, or something I want to apply to engineering. So I like math because of its problem solving ability, for me to quantify things, put them into equations, and use the equations to find solutions to the problem I have. That is what engineering is all about. That's a really good sentence. It shows that I actually understand what I'm getting into in the degree I picked. I understand how I'm linking what I'm learning now to what I'm going to be learning later. So I have a good understanding of what I'm getting into in the degree. And also shows that I have, without me saying I'm passionate, I show that I enjoy problem solving. I enjoy things that are big parts of the degree. So it shows my passion, really. Now my bad is bad because, like we said here, don't just list things that you've done. Don't just list your achievements. I was a mentor for physics and chemistry, head of community service, a prefect. It's just like a long sentence of those things, like ticking boxes, those things I've done. And the funny thing about this sentence is that, like, at the start of my interview for Imperial, they asked me about the community service work I had done. So not about any of the reading I had done that I got into a bit more detail about, but how I help how the community service work I do and how I go about it and how I prepare for it and things. And that's how I got at ease with my interviewer. And if I had expanded on that a bit more in my statement, it might have made things even easier because we were able to relate to each other because of that. And then my ugly is because I mean, it's true. I do enjoy looking at how you can upscale processes, but the word excites me is just like, Zara, really? Was that the word? Was that the word? Is that what you're really gonna say? So like, yeah, it's just like, it's corny, like we said. It's cheesy, but like, it is true, just like I wish I had said it a bit differently as well.
So these are some extracts from my personal statement showing like something I think was good, something I think was bad, and the ugly. So this first line, I say this led me to research chemical reactor designs, reinforcing my desire to study this course, its design elements, and how component steps of the chemical process from factors. Yeah, so all that. And what I really like about this one is that it leads on from a line where I had just spoken about my my EPQ. So I talked about how my EPQ now led me to, so my EPQ is already super curricular. So then I talk about how my EPQ led me to do further research, which is another super curricular. And that further announced like that further research, making me even more excited, more like invested in like studying this degree. And then I now just to show like, okay, he actually understands some of the things he's talking about and some of like the fundamentals of chemical engineering. And I start talking about design elements and transport phenomena, heat exchange, waste disposal. And then I now finally conclude that with saying like, and all this makes me even more excited to study this degree. So I really like the structure and how it's sort of like a snowball effect. It's like super curricular, more excitement, super curricular, more excitement, and it just keeps leading until it concludes. Then this next one, I go from why I think this one is bad is because it goes from I found the potential use of enzymes to produce like higher quality products, chemical industry, and then I just like jump from there to my interest in nuclear energy spawned from a question I asked in secondary school. And this was like in the middle. So it wasn't like this was introduction and I just like, okay, next part. This was like, it was supposed to flow and I just like jumped from one thing to the next because like limited characters, I couldn't like figure out how to like make it sound natural. So just like, whatever, I've tried. And the ugly is just like, this sentence just genuinely makes my skin crawl because like who talks like this? My prodigious curiosity, like just no, like just why? Like literally just I don't like it. But it's like linked to what Adrian was saying. Sometimes you're going to write your statements and it's going to be good. Like this isn't a bad line, but you just have to accept that some things you're going to be read and then you're just going to be like, which this makes me go, So yeah, that concludes our presentation. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat and we'll be very happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Darius, Sarah, and Adrian. That was a really useful presentation. Lots of very good tips there. And, thank you so much for your honesty as well and talking about, the things that you liked as well as the things that you didn't like in your personal statements. I think it's really useful to kind of give that well-rounded view of it. So thank you very much. I also admit I hadn't heard the term supercurricular before this presentation. So, it's useful to think about those things too and just how you go that extra mile in your personal statement. So yeah, it's really great, really useful. As Darius said, if you've got a question, please do pop it in the chat box and we'll come back to it. I'm going to start with asking a couple of questions of my own. So you did mention in your presentation a little bit about, that support that you could turn to when you're writing your personal statement. And I just wanted to ask, personally, who did you turn to for advice when you were writing your applications and your personal statements? And, who did you find particularly useful to get a second opinion from?
I'll take that.
Okay, yeah, go on.
So I went to the English teacher in my sixth form because I hadn't written an essay in a minute. I needed somebody to like make sure the formatting was okay or like help me with like rewriting sentences to make them shorter and more concise. I also went to my chemistry teacher to make sure that like because done a lot of reading. The reading I had done was, at the end of the day, when you get to university, you're going to understand those things a lot better than when you read it yourself. So I just needed to make sure that all the stuff I was saying wasn't abhorrently wrong. Like, I needed to make sure of that. And then every now and then I'd ask my mom, like, because my mom was still in Nigeria, I was in the UK, I'd call my mom and I'd be like, I'll be writing my personal statements, and I'll be like, oh, what do you think about this part? What do you think about that part? Does that sound like me? Does that not sound like me? So like getting people who like you're close to a lot, who know what you sound like, is also a really good, like not just the academics, but also get your actual personality across, in my opinion. So subject teacher, somebody who's good with like, who has a good hold on the English language, and your family members are good places to turn to.
Yeah, I pretty much same for me. My English teachers, especially when I was like approaching the end, and because that character count was the bane of my existence. So like just figuring out, okay, how can I write this differently? How can I still say the same thing but like reduce the word count? So my English teacher was very helpful for that, and similar to that for like the actual content, and even just for like recommendations on like, oh, what do you think I can go to research this and this and this. My chemistry teachers, and also funnily enough, I didn't do biology, but the biology teacher was a godsend, because she would literally just like, I would go to her and she'd be like, okay, maybe you want to make this part less, like you want to make this part less pronounced and highlight this a bit more. And she just like really, really, really helped me. And also my friends, just like the ones, it's also like Zara said, they know what you sound like. So giving them to like make sure it still sounds like you was very helpful for me, and also my mom.
So I had my referee, who was an English teacher. That's sorry, but yeah, she helped me with my structure and my sentencing words, making it sound nicer. So I had her for that, and then I also went to my form tutor, who would you have it, actually went to Imperial to study chemical engineering. So I pretty much just had him like he already wrote a statement that got him there. So I just pretty much went to him for like research ideas and books to read. He actually lent me a couple of books I could use. So yeah, that was great. And yeah, that was basically it for me.
That's really helpful. Thank you, everybody. And I really like that you've highlighted there, you know, the academic side of things and the research side of things, but also making sure that, you know, you have people involved who know what you sound like as a person too, because as you mentioned, it's really important that your personality shines through there as well. So we've got a question in the chat, which is, how much does chemical engineering relate to physics?
A lot more than you would think. I was honestly, like, I love physics, so I didn't mind it, but I was genuinely shocked by the amount of physics. Like, I knew it was a combination of math, chemistry, and physics, but I thought like the math and chemistry would be like, they would take like 80%, and physics would just have like the remaining 20 to share with the rest. But honestly, we had physical chemistry, which is basically quantum physics, and then you still have physics just like dancing around in all your other modules, just saying hello every now and then. So it's still enjoyable, like you still love what you're learning, but the physics is definitely more than you think it would be. But the lectures are amazing, and the contents of the course is very interesting. So very, yeah, I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, I would agree. There's like a bit of like physics knowledge helps in like so many little aspects of so many of the modules. So fluid mechanics, nobody has really done that until they come to university. But like having an understanding of having a good like grasp of how forces work, momentum, all those like physics concepts is really helpful. I would say that quite a lot of modules look at look at particles and molecules at like with like a physics eye. So heat transfer, mass transfer especially, physical chemistry, thermodynamics, having an understanding of how work and energy play into things, chemical aspects. So it is still chemical, but it's looking at the physics of how the chemicals work at like the microscopic level.
Yeah, I don't really think that. They pretty much covered all the bases there.
Great, thanks, guys.
I just want to point out, because in case like you don't do physics, you might feel like intimidated by what we're saying, but like almost like 40% of my year didn't do physics, and they were like very fine because they realized like physics isn't a subject requirement for the degree. So they take you through the basics for anything you're going to need to be able to be a chemical engineer or to study these courses. So like physical chemistry is quantum physics, but they still start with like basic stuff like ionization energy, structure of the atom, because they want to make sure everyone is like at that same level to progress. So even if you haven't done physics, you're not screwed basically if you haven't done physics. Yeah.
That's really useful to know as well. Thank you. Okay, so I have another question for you, and this one's for all of you as well. So, now that you've been at university for a while, what is it that you've enjoyed about the university experience, and in particular chemical engineering?
I guess I'll start off. The university experience, I love London so much. Like, I love being in the city. I love being able to explore Soho, Shoreditch, all those things. And the thing I quite like about Imperial's like aspects of things is that there's so much you can do with Imperial. Like, there's so many societies you can join. When we would go to campus every Thursday, I'd go to the free lunchtime concerts, listen to classical music to like break up my week. It was so lovely. There's so many cool things you can do, and there's always something on. Like, I would go at the end of every term, I would go to the all-nighters of movies in Bites, where like I would see how long I could stay up the night. And it was so funny because I remember I had a project due the next day. So I tried so hard to make sure that it was finished before the all-nighter so that I could enjoy the all-nighter in peace. And like in between movies, I even brought my computer just in case. I was like, let me just make sure that everything looks okay so that I could sleep for the rest of the day. It was such a great time. Like, you meet so many cool people from all over the world because Imperial is such like a diverse university, so many different countries. So you get to like learn about so many different places, even though you're in London. And in chemical engineering in particular, I really like how helpful all the lecturers are. Like, you can email them, they take all your questions to heart. They'll try to give you extra resources. They have all these office hours where they'll there are quite a lot of lecturers that they enjoy teaching. They know the subjects back to forth, like inside out, and you can see it when they're teaching you, and it just makes it a lot easier.
I'd say, honestly, basically the same thing. I love living in London. It's just like the Imperial campus is literally in South Kensington, like one of like the most beautiful one of like the prettiest areas in like the whole of London. And then you just come out and like you're just surrounded by like so many different things to do. Like when it comes to like extracurriculars, so many, like I think Imperial has like 380 societies. So like you will find something for you. Like it's impossible for you not to. There's literally a wealth of options for you to pick from. And for me, I'm in the ACS, and I really like, yeah, we have an annual showcase every year, Afro Gala, and rehearsals for that were something I really, really enjoyed last year because you just get to meet so many different people. You're all like just having fun, acting, dancing, whatever. And like the friends I made here, like I really, really cherish them. They're amazing. And also, in relation to chemical engineering, I think I'm in second year, so I've not really done much this year, but from last year my favorite thing was probably the design projects, just because it feels like like, because I mean, like in the degree you have a lot of stuff like that, because we also had like rig building, which I also really enjoyed. But think they try to like make your degree, like try to make as many things as possible feel like actual engineering. Like they try to make you feel like an actual engineer as early as possible and as many times as possible, which I really like for chemical engineering specifically.
I think university. I like as I mentioned already, I like the course. Like the course, it's quite an immersive course. You learn so many different things, and there's so many resources available in the department and at uni to support you in when it was pastoral stuff. So if we have pastoral tutors or academics at the library, you have academic tutorials and just things like that. So it was great in that respect. I also like there's a lot of it was quite a nice community thing. I think like it's all students are like STEM, so everyone's pretty like-minded. So it's not very hard often not to make friends. And the was also quite an international uni, so you have people from like many different countries around the world. So you're likely to make friends with people from places that you never would have thought to have gone yourself. And also, yeah, like Daz has already mentioned, London's it's a great city to study in. Like it's just so many things to do, so many places to see, theatres, clubs, all that stuff. Like you'll never run out of things to do in London. And you often get to go to these places with one of the societies you go to. So I joined ACS, cross country athletics, and neuroscience, and they have a lot of events arranged that you can take part in, and yeah, the experience is it's really nice. I quite like it. It's great.
Great, thanks everyone. And then another question. So, obviously this is a series that's called, Being Black in STEM. And these sessions are being run to coincide with Black History Month. So, I wonder whether you could share your thoughts on, how important is it that sessions like these are run by Black students and for Black students?
I think it's. Oh, Zara, you're muted. Were you?
You can go ahead. Go ahead. Start it off.
Oh. And I was just gonna say, I think it's a psychological thing. I think if you hear that you can't do something, or you don't have any evidence to demonstrate that you can do something, you're not gonna feel motivated to try and reach for it. So I think having more like Black faces and Black people in STEM is helpful, because they can give tips about how to aspire to these positions, and also tell them about their experiences. Like we shared some of our experiences being in uni, so like that kind of thing is helpful for Black students, because it makes them feel like they can do it too if they see people like them that have done it before.
Yeah, I definitely would echo that being able to see yourself in this space is so important. Being able to see that something is a possibility for you is really important, because like at the end of the day, like picking your universities, doing all these things, like it's a lot of effort, and there's always risk that it couldn't work out. And knowing that your efforts could be like rewarded just makes it easier for you to take that risk and like put that extra work in to make sure that you can get it, because it can be done. And also just having people who would probably have like similar experiences to you tell you about how they got through the hurdles of those experiences makes it a lot easier and nicer. Like we talk about, like quite a few of us have spoken about how we joined ACS and how that helps us like find people, like to find friends for life and everything. I would definitely echo that. I think that representation is important, and just in just being able to understand like what is out there for you and what is like you see the three of us, and if you're coming for any of the other sessions, you'll see so many different types of people who have all come to Imperial, and you know that there's like Imperial has a space for you too if that is what you want to do.
Yeah, I pretty much echo the same sentiment. It's all about just seeing yourself in those, seeing someone that looks like you in those spaces and knowing like this is something, like this is possible, like all my efforts aren't in vain. It's been done before, so I can do it again. And also just like when you get there, knowing like, oh, I'm not going to be alone. You're going to be people who've gone through like similar things as me, people who I can turn to for advice, people who would be more willing to help me, stuff like that. So yeah, it's just nice to see and to know that you're not alone.
Thanks, everyone. And as Sarah mentioned, we are running other sessions this week, and I've put the link to the Eventbrite page in the chat box if you are interested. You can also catch yesterday's session on our YouTube channel as well. So we're coming to the end of the session. So I just want to say thank you again to Darius, Sarah and Adrian for your time this morning and for sharing your insight and your experience. And I really hope that, you know, the students who've been listening, you know, they found it really useful. I'm sure they have. Just to say as well that this session will be available on our channel too. So if you want to come back to it and watch it again, or, you know, share it with your friends who might find it useful, you know, there's that option to do that as well. And then just another useful resource that I've put in the chat box is a link to the Imperial website where there's some more information on writing personal statements and some advice there as well. So thank you again to our presenters. Thank you so much for your time today. It was a really interesting session. And thank you for everyone who came and listened and joined in with the chat. Like, we really appreciate it. So have a good day. Thank you very much.
Yeah, bye guys.
Bye.